Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Myths episode. This episode will be focusing on JHIN. So if you do end up enjoying this one, make sure to hit the like button. But without further ado, let's go right into the first myth and not waste any more time. This one was a very popular question. What is the interaction between JHIN's ultimate and Quinn's Q or Graves' W ability? So this one is interesting because both of these abilities apply a debuff to the target called Nearsight, which prevents them from seeing pretty much outside of their own vision. But how will that interact with JHIN's ultimate? Well, first testing it with Graves' smokescreen, you can see I clearly have vision of the area I'm sniping in with my ultimate, but the second Graves puts his W on me, I have absolutely no vision, including the vision from my ultimate. However, if we then jump into testing this exact same scenario but instead with Quinn's Q, well, surprisingly enough, the interaction is not the same. Because as Quinn throws her Q on me, it does say I'm blinded and I have the circle around my champion, but I still have vision of the full area in front of me. So it seems like this might be a little buggy, or maybe this is intended, I'm not entirely sure. But moving on to the next myth, does JHIN's E ability mark all of the champions within the trap's AoE? So whenever targets are caught within JHIN's trap, it automatically puts the passive W mark on them so that JHIN can then use the active part of his W and snare them. So in this example, Irelia activated the trap, got the mark on her, but as Lee Sin walked into it, he did not get the mark on him as well. So therefore, his E ability only marks the first champion that actually activated the trap itself and not anyone else that happens to walk in it later on. The third myth is asking what happens if JHIN's attack speed is slowed by something like Nunu's Ice Blast. So this is a fairly simple one to test, and if you look at the bottom left, I have 0.67 attack speed, which is standard among JHIN, 82 attack damage, and the second Nunu throws his Ice Blast, none of those numbers except for the movement speed changes. So abilities that slow attack speed seem to have no effect on JHIN, whether it's for his attack speed itself or his total AD. Moving on to the next one, can Kalista use her ultimate or Tahm Kench use his W on a JHIN that is currently using his own ultimate? Alright, so first starting things off by testing it with Tahm Kench. As I use my ultimate, Tahm Kench applies the stacks and then he uses his W while I still have a couple of shots left, and he's able to successfully cancel my ultimate while he's on the enemy team. But luckily for JHIN, his ultimate's cooldown is still refunded due to the bullets remaining. However, if the Tahm Kench is on his own team, well, unfortunately for all the troll players, they cannot use their W and cancel an allied JHIN's ultimate. Very similar to how Tahm Kenches are not able to use their W Devour on allied champions that are currently backing. And the final test case scenario for this myth is with Kalista ultimate. Now in this example, Kalista actually used her ultimate one time halfway through my own ultimate, so after I fired the first two shots, and she did not press her ultimate button again after that, and it automatically pulled me in the second I finished channeling my own ultimate. So essentially Kalista ultimate waits for JHIN to finish his ultimate before pulling him in. Here's one where I saw a lot of people actually guess incorrectly as to what happens. Can allied spells or smite damage apply JHIN's W passive mark? So we all already know that an allied auto attack on an enemy champion will apply JHIN's W passive mark, but things like Ezreal Q will also be able to apply the mark, since they are technically on-hit effect abilities. However, champion abilities will also be able to apply the mark on the enemy passive, so for example like an Ezreal W. And then if we go onto Summoner's Rift and then test it with Smite, so in this case Chilling Smite, well it seems like even this is also able to apply JHIN's W passive mark on the enemy champion, so in this case Annie. But how close does JHIN have to be to an enemy champion for the W passive mark to apply from an ally? So in this example, I'm chilling all the way in mid lane, Elise in the bot lane auto attacks the Annie, but you see no mark is applied. So I start making my way over to bot lane to get a bit closer to them, and as I finally get more in range, Elise auto attacks the Annie, and this time the mark is applied. The next question is asking, is JHIN able to cast Blue Trinket while he is mid ultimate? So this is somewhat of a new update that also applies to other champion ultimates that are similar to JHIN, so maybe like Xerath, where the answer is yes, they can use Blue Trinket while they are in the mode of essentially channeling and using their ultimate. Moving forward, what's the interaction with JHIN's on-kill passive that spawns the flower and Kog'Maw or Karthus passive? So as I'm sure most of you are aware, the passive on his Z ability is essentially it places the trap down on the ground whenever JHIN gets the final blow on a target. So in the first example, we're going to be testing it with Karthus, who has a passive ability that activates upon death. And it seems like both of them activate at the exact same time, JHIN's flower and Karthus' passive. But what about a champion whose death passive allows them to move around? Well, here comes Kog'Maw to test this next. After Jhin takes his sweet time to finally reload, he gets the killing blow on Kog'Maw, and it also activates the flower upon where Kog'Maw died, not where Kog'Maw dies later on from his passive instead. And moving on to the next question, can Yasuo or Braum block Jin's trap placement? So the big question here is, does the trap just completely get negated by the wind wall, or does it fall down to the ground in front of the wind wall? Well, as Yasuo creates his wind wall and Jhin throws his trap right at the wind wall, the trap ends up falling down flat to the ground in front of the ability, and it doesn't just completely disappear. And then moving on to test this with Braum as well, just to make sure the interaction is the same and there's nothing weird going on, the trap also falls right on the ground in front of Braum's shield. The next question is asking, are you able to teleport to Jin's trap with the summoner spell teleport? So this one is also something that a lot of people have been asking, and luckily for us, it is also very easy to test. As I throw down the trap, Braum is easily able to use the summoner spell teleport and go right towards the trap anywhere on the map. Moving on to the third last question, will Jin's auto proc his W passive if he auto attacks while Jax has his E on, or while Shen has his W on? Jin's W passive states that champions that have been struck by his basic attack will get marked. It doesn't specify that it has to deal damage, it just has to make contact. But as we tested with Jax, he dodges the auto attack and no mark was placed. Alright, well, how about Shen? Is the interaction any different here? Well, as he procs his W and Jhin autos him, the answer is no, and no mark was applied. What about this question? Will Jin's W mark targets if it is on cooldown still? So for this one, I'm first going to show you that I am able to proc the mark on Jax, you see it right there. I use my W, it is now on cooldown. Following this, if I were to auto attack Jax once again, the mark will not be applied to him. However, if we auto attack him again when the W ability is on 4 or less seconds of the cooldown remaining, it will then be able to apply the mark stack once again. So a neat little thing to remember when playing Jhin. And the final question of this episode, what is the interaction with Jhin and Bard ultimates? Also a fairly easy one to test, and as the Jhin player, I will first use my ultimate, fire one shot just to show that it is working. Bard will then use his ultimate on myself, which will then cancel my own ultimate, but luckily for Jhin, it is still refunded based on how many shots were still remaining. Alright guys, that is it for this episode of the League of Myths series. If you did enjoy it, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to submit any myth questions you have to my Twitter page, and maybe you'll see your name in the next episode. But definitely make sure to check out the previous episode featuring the new Shen rework as well, and I truly thank each and every one of you for watching, and I really hope to see you for the next episode. Peace.